In the granite quarries above Aswan, on the east bank of the Nile in the far south of Egypt, a single block of stone still lies on its side in the bedrock where it was cut. It was never finished. It was never moved. It has rested in that open trench for more than 3,000 years, and if you walk its length, you walk for almost 42 meters, a building of a dozen stories laid flat in the rock. Across its surface, the marks of the workers are still there, thousands of shallow, rounded scars, each one the print of a ball of dark stone swung against the granite until the rock gave up its dust. This is the largest obelisk the ancient world ever attempted. Had it ever stood upright, it would have weighed more than 1,000 tons. It never stood, because a fracture opened along its body while it was still joined to the ground, and the people who had spent months freeing it walked away and left it lying there. That abandoned stone answers one question completely and leaves a far larger one wide open. It shows us, better than any other place on Earth, how the Egyptians cut a giant out of solid granite. It does not show us how they stood one up. And by the end of this, you will see the device they most likely used, and the one part of it that nobody has ever managed to prove. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. You have probably heard the broad version already. Skilled crews, ramps of mud brick and rubble, ropes of palm fiber, the muscle of thousands of men. None of that is wrong. It is the silhouette of an answer rather than the answer, and the moment you lean on it, it gives way. The Egyptians left us an enormous amount about their obelisks. They left the quarry marks behind. There are carved scenes of the great stones moving by water. There are inscriptions that boast about the weight and the speed of the work. On the one moment that matters most, the instant a finished shaft goes from lying flat to standing vertical, they left nothing. No drawing. No description. The page that should hold the method is blank, and it has stayed blank for as long as anyone has looked. Start with the stone itself, because everything else grows out of it. The northern quarry at Aswan is a field of rose-colored granite, hard and dense and shot through with darker veins, the same stone the Egyptians prized for their finest work. Granite does not flake or split cleanly the way limestone does. You cannot simply chisel it into shape. To work it, the quarry crews used balls of dolerite, a stone even harder than the granite, some of them the size of a melon, and heavy in both hands. They pounded. They stood in the trenches around the outline of the obelisk and hammered the granite into powder, blow after blow, lowering the channel by a finger's width at a time, sweeping out the dust, and pounding again. Those trenches around the unfinished shaft are still there, smooth and rounded from the endless impact. You can see where individual workers knelt. You can see the exact width a single body needed to swing. In 1922, the English engineer and Egyptologist Reginald Engelbach surveyed this quarry in detail and worked out what the abandoned stone could tell us. His measurements are still the foundation of how we read the place. He recorded the size, traced the fracture that ended the work, and showed how the crews had been undercutting the whole mass from below, freeing it from the bedrock so that it could eventually be levered loose and slid away. The block was almost certainly intended to be one of the largest stones ever raised, perhaps a partner to an obelisk that was actually erected somewhere else. Then the granite failed them. A flaw ran through the body of the stone, the kind of hidden weakness that only shows itself once the work is far advanced, and a cracked obelisk was worthless. Months of labor by a large crew, gone in the discovery of a single line. They left it as a kind of accidental textbook, a giant frozen halfway out of the rock, and it is the clearest window we will ever have into the first half of the process. This is where the real difficulty starts to show its size. The unfinished obelisk would have weighed more than 1,000 tons, and it never moved, so set it aside for a moment and look at the ones that did. The largest Egyptian obelisk still standing anywhere in the world began its life at Karnak and now stands in Rome. It is a little over 30 meters tall and weighs more than 400 tons. Hatshepsut raised a pair of them at Karnak, and the survivor still stands nearly 30 meters high and weighs over 300 tons. These are not guesses about stones that might once have existed. They are real objects you can walk up to and put your hand on, and they are standing upright, balanced on a base you could almost cover with a single rug, as straight and true as the day they were placed. Now hold the problem in your hands. A column of solid granite longer than a tennis court is wide, weighing as much as a small ship. It arrives lying flat. It has to finish vertical, its lower end seated exactly on a prepared foundation, and it can never be allowed to drop or to topple, because a stone like that, once it begins to move the wrong way, cannot be stopped by any number of men. Ropes alone will not raise it. You cannot simply haul a 400-ton stone upright from the top, because long before it came near vertical, the forces involved would tear any ancient rope apart and crush whatever stood beneath it. The orthodox answer, ramps and ropes and manpower, is true as far as it goes. The crack in it is that those three words hide the whole problem instead of solving it. The question was never whether they had enough men. The question is what those men were standing on, what they were pulling against, and what they were lowering the stone into. And this is the part that quietly unsettles people once they notice it. The Egyptians were not shy about recording their great achievements. On the walls of Hatshepsut's mortuary temple, there is a long and careful relief showing two of her obelisks being moved. You can see them lying end to end on an enormous barge, lashed down, while rows of boats tow the whole load down the river. The artists recorded the ships, the ropes, the oarsmen, the cargo. They documented the transport in loving detail. Then the carving stops. The obelisks reach their destination and the story simply ends, at the exact moment that should have been the climax. The raising is not shown. It is not shown there. And it is not shown anywhere else in the entire surviving record of a people who carved almost everything else they were proud of. There are honest ways to read that silence, and they matter, because this is the seam where fact ends and interpretation begins. Perhaps the method was so ordinary to them, so much a matter of guild routine, that nobody thought it worth a wall. Maybe the records did exist, on papyrus and wood that rotted away, and only the stone survived. Or perhaps the men who knew kept the knowledge among themselves, the way skilled trades have always guarded the thing that makes them necessary. Any of those could be true, and we cannot presently choose between them. What we can say plainly is that the gap is real. The most demanding piece of engineering in the ancient world was carried out again and again at enormous scale, and the people who did it never left us a single image of how. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. So with no instruction manual to read, the claim to know the device they used has to be earned a different way. It can be reconstructed, carefully, from the surviving foundations, from the hard limits of physics, and from the handful of clues the Egyptians left without meaning to. When you assemble those pieces, they point with surprising consistency toward one system. What they used was a method rather than a single machine, a system built out of earth and sand and gravity, a way of turning the desert itself into a slow and controllable lever. It works like this. First, the crews raise a great embankment of mud, brick, and rubble against the prepared foundation, a solid artificial hill with a ramp climbing one side. Built into the top of that embankment, directly above the place where the base of the obelisk must come to rest, they leave a funnel-shaped pit, and they pack that pit full of sand. The finished obelisk is dragged up the ramp, base first, until its lower end hangs out over the mouth of the sand-filled funnel, and the rest of its great length lies back along the slope behind it. Then, slowly, the crews begin to draw the sand out from the bottom of the pit, through channels cut at its base. As the sand runs away, the level inside the funnel sinks, and the heavy base of the obelisk settles down into the emptying space, tipping the towering shaft upward by a degree at a time. The sand is the brake. It is a substance that can bear tremendous weight and still be released a handful at a time, and that is the whole secret of the thing. The stone does not fall. It descends into the pit at exactly the speed the workers allow, while teams on ropes steady it from the front, and a low wall of stone, the turning edge, waits at the base to catch it and stop it from sliding too far. When the last of the sand is gone, the obelisk is standing, leaning back against the body of the embankment, and the final degrees can be brought home with ropes and levers and careful packing. Then the hill is dug away from around it, basket by basket, and the giant is left standing alone against the sky. That reconstruction is elegant, and it is the leading theory for good reasons. It uses only materials and techniques the Egyptians demonstrably possessed. It explains the embankments and foundation cuttings that have actually been found at obelisk sites. And it survives the simplest test there is, which is that people have gone out and tried it. In the 1990s, a team of archaeologists and stonemasons set out to raise an obelisk by exactly these principles. On camera, in Egypt, with a stone scaled far down from the ancient giants. They built the ramp. They built the pit. They worked the sand and the ropes and the turning groove. And it was hard. Their first serious attempt did not go cleanly, and they had to stop, rethink, and rebuild before a stone of only a few dozen tons finally came upright into its place. A few dozen tons. Hold that figure against the real ones for a moment. The modern crew, with steel cable, with engineering training, with the full benefit of the very theory they were testing, struggled to stand up a stone barely a tenth the weight of the granite columns the Egyptians raised in pairs, and a small fraction of the one still lying in the quarry at Aswan. The experiment proved something that matters. It showed that the method is real, that sand and gravity and a groove can in fact bring a heavy stone upright under control. It did not prove the method at the scale that actually counts. Nobody has ever raised a 400-ton obelisk by any reconstructed technique, modern or ancient. The theory holds for the small stones. The giants remain, in the most literal sense, unrepeated, and the giants are exactly what the Egyptians keep telling us they raised. Almost in passing, as if it were nothing remarkable. There is an inscription connected to Hatshepsut's obelisks at Karnak, set down at her own command, that records how long the work took. From the moment the quarrymen first cut into the mountain to the moment the finished obelisk stood gilded and upright at the temple, she gives a figure. 7 months. 2 obelisks, each almost 100 feet of solid granite, weighing hundreds of tons apiece, quarried and shipped and dressed and stood on end, in 7 months. The number is a boast, and rulers boast, so we hold it lightly, but it is not an outsider's guess or a modern fantasy. It is the people who did the work, telling us in their own voice how quickly they could do it. The confidence inside that figure is the thing worth noticing. There is no hesitation in it, no hint that what it describes was rare or barely possible. It reads like a foreman reporting a job finished on schedule. Whatever device they used, they were so practiced with it that the slow part was the cutting and the carrying, not the standing of the stone. The hardest thing we cannot reconstruct, they treat it as the routine end of a routine project. The distance between our uncertainty and their ease is the strangest part of the whole story. One thing should be said plainly here, in case it has not been clear. This is a channel about the questions the ancient world has not fully closed. Some of what we have looked at is solid and documented: the stone in the quarry, the tool marks, the transport relief, the inscription in the Queen's own words. Some of it is reconstruction, the embankment and the funnel and the groove. Our best reading of an answer the Egyptians never wrote down. And where it is reconstruction, I have said so. None of it points to anyone but the Egyptians themselves. And the wonder here has nothing to do with the builders being incapable. The opposite is true. They were so good at it that they made the hardest engineering problem of the ancient world look like ordinary work, and then declined to explain themselves. So when the title asks about the device they used, this is the honest shape of the answer. They used a system, and its pieces can be named. A great ramped embankment of brick and rubble. A funnel pit at its summit, packed tight with sand. The finished obelisk hauled up base first to hang over the mouth of that pit. Sand drawn off slowly from below so that the heavy base sinks while the shaft rises, the loose grains working as a brake fine enough to lower a giant one handful at a time. A turning edge of stone to catch the base. Ropes and levers and disciplined crews to steady the lift and bring it home. And then the whole hill carved away to leave the obelisk clean and vertical against the sky. Earth, sand, gravity, rope, and overwhelming organized human effort, combined by people who understood the behavior of heavy stone better than almost anyone who has lived since. That is the most coherent reconstruction we have. Every piece of it is real, drawn from foundations and physics and the marks on the stones, even though the single drawing that would settle it was never carved, or never survived. The strange thing is that the answer turns out to be ordinary, and we still cannot prove it was the one they used. And the door does not close. Not one Egyptian source confirms that this is how it was done. The whole reconstruction is built backward, from foundations and physics and a few accidental clues, and the largest obelisks, the ones above 400 tons, have never been raised again by anyone using any method at all. So the true upper limit of what that system could achieve has never once been tested. The unfinished obelisk still lies in its trench above Aswan, more than 1,000 tons of granite that was never given the chance to demonstrate the answer, the fracture running through its body like a sentence cut off in the middle of a word. The crews who could have shown us have been gone for 3,000 years, and they took the one image we want with them, if it ever existed at all. We can stand the small stones up and watch the principal work. We can read the Queen's 7 months and feel how easy it must have been for them. We still cannot bridge the distance between those two facts, and until somebody does, the obelisks keep their secret out in the open, standing in the daylight in Rome and Paris and Istanbul and Karnak, where millions of people pass them every year. They ask what the carvings say. They photograph the stone. Almost none of them stop on the harder question, the one the builders answered so completely except for the single step that counts. How exactly did anyone ever stand one of these upright? Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.